Why don't we get started? So good evening, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to tonight's Justice Now conversation sponsored by the National Urban League. I'm your host, Jerica Richardson, and I'm the Senior Vice President for Equitable Justice and Strategic Initiatives at the National Urban League. And tonight we're going to be talking about a critically important topic as we head into the holiday season while we are still in the midst of a pandemic. There's a topic that is critically important, as I said before, and we're discussing mental health. And joining me here this evening are two very familiar faces to I know many of you. They have become household names in talking about this issue. We'll be speaking with board certified clinical psychologist, Dr. Jeff Gardier, and celebrity life strategist, Jax Lake, to discuss, as I said before, mental health and really how we can navigate all the mental health challenges that so many of us are experiencing right now through developing healthy coping strategies. So, Dr. Jeff, Jax, welcome to you both.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
It's a pleasure to be on with you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. So let's just jump right in. You know, in many communities of color, mental health challenges and illnesses are a taboo topic. For Black people, our story is one of perseverance and resilience. After all, we've survived slavery, Jim Crow. And so surely we should be able to survive sadness and anxiety. But there's a stigma, and that stigma is particularly dangerous for people of color, African Americans, Latinx folks, Asian and Native Americans, because we often are struggling from mental health challenges and disorders, and we have far greater disparities in actually getting help with them as opposed to our white counterparts. So I want to open this question up to both of you, and I'll start with Dr. Jeff. What led you to this work, and how often has the fight against the stigma of mental health really shown up for you when dealing with communities of color?
Very early on in my life, dealing with racism, as all of us have, I knew that there was something inherently wrong where people were judging you really by the color of your skin and not the content of your character. And I knew that this had something to do with someone's psychological well-being or lack of well-being. And so it was important for me to begin to explore that. What was in someone's mind that would make them have all of these kinds of false assumptions around individuals based on just the way that they look or what their culture or where they come from. And so that was early foray into mental health, and always knew I wanted to become a psychologist. With regard to looking at the fact that many of us as people of color have that stigma around talking about mental health issues and mental wellness, it's something that I have dealt with really as a psychologist for the past 38 years. Mm-hmm. However, I do see that folks like Jax, folks like you who are talking about mental health, who are champions of mental health at a very young age, you all are the next generation, really have tackled this in a way that my generation did not. We're starting to now, but this younger generation, Jax's generation, absolutely understands the importance of discussing mental illness, but also the importance of mental wellness.
Thank you for that, Dr. Jeff. And it is so important that we are having these conversations. And I will say that the pandemic highlighted so many inequities in our community, and this absolutely is one of them. And I hope that this moment that we are in really does become a movement, and there's sustained dialogue on this and more intention on how we address this. Jax, can you tell us a little bit about your journey and what led you to this work?
Yes, what led me to this work, when I was a little kid, I would say maybe about 3 years old, I remember standing in my driveway and looking down at my little Bobo sneakers and looking up at the sky and saying to myself, when I grow up, I want to help people. I knew as a little kid I wanted to be of service and champion for others. At that time, although I was small, my parents were going through a divorce. And I saw some dysfunction and things going on that I actually surprisingly still remember. And I just wanted to, be a light and help others. So I furthered my education. I continue to just, give back and try to always use God as my guide and try to support and encourage and help others. And there was also trauma in my life and within the family. And I said, I need to help some people so that they don't have to continue to endure trauma or to experience trauma. So I just, carved out a path and said, what can I do to be of service to others?
Well, service is so important, and it really is the gift that we all pay to be here on this earth. And I think if we think about service, yes, we know there's a stigma in our community, and we know that oftentimes people of color are less likely to pursue help when they need it. But then we also know that there is a segment of our community that is interested and is looking for support and help. But quite frankly, when we try to identify folks to provide that support, the numbers of those service providers that look like us really is lacking and is just not parallel. Dr. Jeff, can you talk a little bit about that disparity and the impact it has on our community?
Yes, absolutely. We know that those of us who are of color do not fill the ranks of those who are mental health providers. As a matter of fact, only 5% of people of color are either psychologists, psychiatrists, or in the social work field, or working as providers of mental wellness. And so this, I think in many ways contributes to that lack of cultural sensitivity and cultural competence that is part of this kind of industry that we're in. There aren't enough of us who are influencing other people to understand why they should have some sort of cultural humility when it comes to working with people of color. So one of the things that we're doing, perhaps at the medical school where I am, Touro College of Osteopathic Medicine, is making sure that we bring in as diverse a student body as possible, bringing in many people of color, young people of color, as medical students and pharmacy students, making sure that in our medical school classes that all of our students, because we just can't do it alone, as I talked about, and as you referred to, Jericho, we just don't have those numbers yet. And therefore, we have to train whites and others to have that cultural sensitivity, cultural competence, cultural humility to be able to work with our population and with all populations. And so that's a vital part of what we need to do. First, make sure that we understand that medicine is inherently has issues with regard to racism. Secondly, the importance of cultural sensitivity and cultural competence in understanding and treating patients of color, and as well as all patients. Third, making sure that we bring in as many people of color as possible into all of the different professions with regard to helping people with, with regard to medical and psychological issues. And then, of course, the most important thing is smashing that stigma with regard to talking about mental health struggles. It's not always, Jackson and I talked about this last time we were together. It's not always about mental illness. Sometimes it's the mental health challenges that we have. All of us have challenges. All of us have mental health challenges. And I'll let you in on something. I think all of us have some sort of mental illness. We all have our cross to bear, but we should not be ashamed of it. We should wear it, as a badge that we are dealing with life on life's terms, and we're doing the best we can to seek out our happiness.
It's well
Absolutely.
said, because we are human. And I think there's so much of the myths out there when we talk about the strong Black woman, or we talk about these resilient Black people, that, we're frowned upon if we're just honest about the struggles that, as you said, Dr. Jeff, everyone has. I want to talk a little bit more, Jax, about external factors. As I said earlier when we started, we are in the midst of a pandemic. And while we've seen suicide rates overall drop, we've seen them rise among young people and people of color. Can you talk about the impact of this pandemic, and what might be driving that?
Yes, absolutely. The impact of the pandemic has been so profound on so many. In coaching my clients, what I've realized is that initially a lot of my clients kind of pumped the brakes in the beginning of the pandemic, but the ones that took their foot off the brake in the middle of the pandemic and decided, you know what, let me get prepared so that when I come out of the pandemic, I'll be even stronger and more resilient.
Mm.
So let me ask for help now, because I always say you need to ask for help to be strong, and think of it as a sign of strength as opposed to a sign of weakness. Let's also think about being solution focused instead of problem centered. So those that prepared during the pandemic are the ones that are that much more resilient today. So we really have to just understand that it's okay to ask for help. Do what you have to do. When you look back and you see the different childhood trauma and the environmental factors and other areas that cause a lot of burden in people's minds and hearts and spirits, we just have to make sure that we reach out to others for help, but also be careful in who you reach out to, because everyone
Mm.
is not prepared to help you to get to the next level. So that's why it's so important to remove the stigma, like we talk about, of mental health, and normalize it. Because like Dr. Jeff said, there's such a small percentage of people in this field that our people are going misdiagnosed, under-helped, essentially, right? Under service.
Mhm.
And we have to make sure that we help them in the ways that we need. So many times in urban communities, it's a big deal. We kind of want to, have our children, oh, he plays basketball, or she does this, and, oh, my son's going to get to the NFL. Well, let's kind of tout our children, excelling in sciences, excelling in math, excelling in human services, so that when they grow up, that they look forward to maybe counseling someone, becoming that social worker or the educator to help others to heal our community.
Absolutely, Jackson. And if I may add, that when we look at these suicide rates that have dramatically increased for young Black males, and now we're seeing for young Black females, I think this really does speak to, because of the pandemic, a lot of the social isolation, social distancing, the pressures of not being able to develop normally with regard to social and interactional skills. After all, school is not just about reading, writing, and arithmetic. It's also about learning how to come out with regard to your sexuality, how to claim your mental stability, how to be part of the world and still be, your own boss. With
Mhm.
regard to your thinking. But I think with a lot of our young people, these suicide rates increasing the way they are extremely troubling. It tells me that we are not meeting their needs, that they are dealing with depression and they're dealing with anxiety. Anxiety is the number one issue, I believe, in the world right now. Everybody's nervous, right? And I'm glad I'm
Mm.
not alone, because I was anxious for a very long time. But I think we're all a little bit anxious and dealing with that too. And it also speaks to the environmental conditions of our young Black people, being in neighborhoods where they're seeing a lot of violence or experiencing violence, having trauma from those sorts of situations, being in places where they're not being enriched or people are not listening to them. And of course, this idea that all young people are so resilient that whatever they're going through, they can work it out. Or how can someone be so young and be so depressed? Well, they can be. And so until we begin to address those issues, until we have more broadcasts like this one, where we're actually showing my age, I said broadcast, where where we're actually talking about these major issues with regard to rescuing our young people and making sure that they get counseling services in school, the checkup from the neck up, if you will, with regard to what's going on with them, we're going to see those suicide rates continue to increase. And I think it really does speak to, more than anything, that the pressure we are under as people of color in a world now, we see it with the Ahmaud Arbery case. We see it with what happened in Minnesota. We see it with the killings of unarmed Black people, unarmed Black men. So all of these things are major stressors. Racism does kill. Whether it's implicit, explicit, it does kill. It breaks us down. Physically, it can attack us by being in the wrong place at the wrong time. But eventually, if we don't address what's going on with climate issues, if we don't address what's going on with partisan politics, with stopping the vote of Black people, with all of the things that are major stressors, we're going to see, God forbid, those rates continue, those suicide rates continue to increase, and more Black people being under stress and experiencing more mental health issues.
Absolutely. And
There was so, go ahead.
And we also have to know that
Go
it's
ahead,
okay to not be okay. So many times we think that we have to have it all figured out, our career, our family, and everything with our life. Like, we don't have to have it all figured out at all times. It's a process and it's a journey. And so we have to be okay walking that journey and striving to be okay.
Yes. There was just so much to unpack from that. We talked about the environmental pressures that's happening and really being placed on our community. We talked about trauma. I mean, so many of the issues that you lifted up are ones that we talk about on Justice Now and at the National Urban League. You mentioned all the trials that have been happening over and over again. I want to add one other piece to that, though. We are experiencing these things. These are environmental traumas, but we also have really the advent of social media. So although we can say, and I'm sure many in our community have known all of these disparities, the brutality that happens to members of our community at the hands of law enforcement and others, traditional media and now social media is actually probably adding to the trauma. All you have to do is turn on your phone, go on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I mean, our young people are seeing these disturbing videos over and over and over again. And while it has increased transparency in the conversation around how we address this brutality in our country, and it has politically, it helps us move the ball forward, it really is dragging us down mentally, because it is just constant exposure to trauma over and over again. Can you all speak to the social media aspect of it, and maybe also talk a little bit about how one copes, especially for some of our parents that might be tuning in that have young people that are on social media platforms constantly? How do we strike a balance and really try to protect the health of our young people, but also recognizing that these new tools and access to information also help to move the ball forward in terms of justice?
That's the key, Jerica, striking a balance. And we have to make sure as parents that we realize that we are not to be our children's friend, but we're their parent. So we have to be responsible and set parameters and boundaries around their social media use, around how often they're utilizing their, smartphones, right? So sometimes we also have to look at how are we being as an example to our children. Are we glued to our smartphones constantly? Are we, glued to, our laptops and tablets and viewing social media? Do we have the news on in our home 24/7? Like, I know my dad has the news on constantly and he's always stressed out and out of his mind. But I tell him, Dad, look, turn the television off, watch something else, or don't watch anything at all. Like, just read and be in a safe space without continuing to watch all these, negative, things come into your brain, because then you start living it, you start becoming it, and you start to develop physiological symptoms to the external stressors. So we really have to monitor and just find that balance and say, it's okay to be on your phone. It's okay to watch television, but what is the duration, right? What is the quality of what you're doing and what you're watching? And understand that we can tell our children, no, put it down, or no, you're not using it today. And that once again, it's okay to do that. We're the parents.
Jax, I'm inviting you over to my home to tell that to my, okay, because it of extortion. When I try to take away their tablets or whatever, they lose their minds. But you're absolutely right. We have to insist on that. We have to put up with whatever the fight is for them, because I think it really does speak to an addiction many times that we have
Yeah.
to our devices, to social media, and so on. And we know that social media, there are some great things about it. We're on social media right now. This is incredibly wonderful that we're talking about, you know, mental health and the struggles that we face and what some of the empowerment strategies are. But not everyone is doing what we're doing. There are some social media that's an absolute cesspool. We've seen that one of the reasons that we have such partisan politics is because we have people, domestic terrorists and international terrorists, in the guise of other nations that have poisoned the waters with regard to the type of information that we are getting. This disinformation that has caused many to think that the previous president is still president. The disinformation in which we as people of color suffer disproportionately due to COVID-19 and disproportionately did not get the vaccine. Now we have it and we're not using that because of disinformation, causing us to be much more in danger with regard to our health. The disinformation that causes us to hate one another, and where we see a divide of sexuality, of race, the disinformation that has caused us to have anxiety and depression, the disinformation that forces us to continue to not look at issues with regard to global warming and the climate crisis. This disinformation is tearing our country apart. It's tearing our world apart, and we're seeing the results of that now. So somehow we have to turn around social media and make it what it was meant to do, to connect people, not to disconnect people, to get people to communicate, not to shut off one another and not listen to one another or respect one another. So those are the things, Jax, going with your particular strategies with how we control what our kids see, making sure that the parental controls are there, making sure that you turn off the news after getting the vital information, making sure that you go to reliable news sources. Those are the things that are important and that will keep us healthier as we deal with social media.
Yes.
Reliable sources, thank you, Dr. Jeff, are so important. And I thank you both for really being on here and doing some truth telling in a time and age where, as you said, we are bombarded with misinformation day after day, hour after hour, minute after minute. I also want to make sure that we leave our viewers with some information. I think so many of us, can acknowledge that we are having our own mental health struggles. But what guidance do you give to folks who have relatives or other loved ones that are struggling? What advice do you give them on how to introduce that conversation? And I say it because we also know in the Black community and the stigma that often the response, if you talk to some of our relatives and loved ones, will be, well, just pray it away, pray. And I have no problem with prayer. I think it is helpful and important. But how do we really guide people and make sure that they don't lose out on the support that can add to them really being able to navigating these ups and downs of life?
Well, I'm so glad you said the pray it away part, because there's a secondary part to it, right? And Dr. Jeff, you both know, prayer without faith, without works is dead, right? So we can have faith and we can talk to our family about praying it away, or they can talk about praying it away, but the other part is works. So we still have to do the work. And we have to say what that work is. You need help, and it's okay. We all need help. So we just truly, truly have to normalize it and provide opportunities for our families to engage and not put them on the spot, not try to belittle them, not try to embarrass them or demean them in any way, but just have an open, honest conversation rooted in love. Not often do we root things in love, and we are loving people because that's how we were designed. We're the greatest people on the earth, right? But sometimes we can be a bit abrasive to our family and like, oh, you're just crazy. And that can put somebody into a shell and make them have more anxiety if they come to your house for the holidays, right? Now they're more afraid because somebody's going to call me crazy or somebody's going to call me bipolar or whatever it may be. So now they shut down. And once you shut down, it's harder to receive the information. And your goal is for them to receive it so that they can get help. You know, perhaps you want to give them some website, that they might be able to go to or some other resource. You can text it to them because sometimes they're not in the space to receive it as you're speaking. So just follow up with it, be diligent. If church is your thing or your house of worship, do that as well, obviously, because that is a great, sense of peace for many. And many I've found that don't have that sense of peace, don't have that connection. Right. So you have to be, rooted and grounded and truly try to want to move forward. Just because you want them to move forward does not mean that they're going to move forward. They have to have a willing heart and be ready to do that. But as long as you're giving them that information in love and respect and sincerity and authenticity, it makes a great difference. And sometimes, like you see on the shows, sometimes you simply need an intervention with some other family members that are like-minded and let them know, like, I love you. We love you. We want you to be better. And there is help out there. Give them a phone number, And we also have to remember, and Dr. Jeff, I obviously know that like non-malfeasance, right? First, do no harm. So you really have to be careful who you speak to, because when you start speaking to people and you start pulling out trauma and different issues around the holidays of things that they've endured when they were kids, everybody, when they walk out that door, they're not capable of going home and just leaving it at the dinner table. Right? Now it's unpacked and they have to try to deal with that. And sometimes they don't have the tools to deal with that. So we also have to be careful what conversations we have with our family and at what point. And are they ready to receive it? And how can they process it? And if not, how can I be of service to help them to process it?
I agree wholeheartedly. I couldn't add anything more than what you said there, Jax, other than the importance of if you talk the talk, you walk the walk, right? So whether you be a mental health specialist, whether you be, regular family person, that if you would like other people to actually avail themselves of therapy, of counseling, of coaching, it's important to let them know that you've done that yourself, that you also have mental health issues. I'm the first one to tell you that I've had severe mental health challenges, right? Obsessive compulsive disorder, generalized anxiety, hypochondriasis, the unreasonable fear of getting disease and so on. And even with the obsessive compulsive disorder, the rituals, turning things on and off 5 times to feel, less anxious, running back and checking the stove all the time. I used to do that all the time. It would take me an hour to get to where I was going to, before I could leave the house, because I'd go back and check the stove, make sure that the gas was off, And one day I finally stopped doing it because I realized that it was an electric stove. So, yes, and the point is, and the point is, we also have to learn to laugh at some of the things that we go through. It's not all that heavy. We have to learn to laugh at ourselves and to be able to reinforce individuals who are getting therapy and being, again, honest about, hey, you're not alone. We all have a burden to bear. We all have a cross to bear. And look, I'm an ordained minister. I believe in prayer. But I also know God helps those who help themselves. And I think God would be very proud. Allah would be very proud. Jehovah would be very proud if we all availed ourselves of some counseling or coaching or therapy, because it only makes us stronger individuals.
Absolutely.
I wholeheartedly agree. It starts with us, and trying to get others on board and get the support. We have to walk the walk and we have to live it in our daily lives. I have really just learned so much from you all in this conversation, and I appreciate the guidance that you have given to our viewers. Before we close, I just want to give you each an opportunity to share some last words or closing thoughts, anything that you want to leave our viewers with this evening. Jax, I'll go to you.
Sure. Just, I would say, believe in yourself. Believe in yourself. Know that, anything is possible. Put in the work. Don't be afraid to put in the work. Be kind to yourself. And not only be kind to yourself, be kind to others. Forgive yourself for the things that you've done wrong, right? Forgive others for what they have done wrong to you. Everybody has gone through things in life. Everybody's made poor choices at some point. None of us are perfect, but look at life from today and move forward. Don't keep digging into the past and picking the old wound, because all it's going to do is bleed every single time. So you have the power. Connect with the higher power, which will truly give you the strength that you need. Make sure you utilize your circle, your faith circle, your friend circle. And if you can't reach out to someone in your friend circle, maybe they're not truly your friends, and you need to create a new circle. And don't be afraid to do that. And like Dr. Jeff was saying, sometimes it's really not that serious. We put so much extra burden and pressure on ourselves. We have to love ourselves enough to give ourselves a break. We are the ones many times that cause a lot of the stressors and the physiological symptoms and issues that we endure, when it's really not that necessary. Dr. Jeff had a dog on an electric stove, right? So that shows sometimes we put too much burden, on ourselves, and it can just really drive us to have mental health challenges and mental health issues that could have been avoided if we just learned to relax and love on ourselves and just do the right thing.
That's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And I would add, I think it's really important for us, more than anything else, to stay in positivity. There are so many tragic things that are happening, but we have to, in some ways, be time travelers and look at how do these things begin to play out in our lives? What do they really mean? We may not have the answer today, but we'll have that answer tomorrow or the day after. All is in divine order, but we have to stay positive. We have to stay honest to ourselves, honest in our relationships, honest with others. If we do that, karma's a real thing. You will be blessed. Of course, there will be situations where you'll have to deal with many difficult issues in life. That's part of life. But if you stay true to the light, if you stay true to the honesty, then it will be okay. And that's the most important thing. I'd also, of course, like to send my condolences to the Shabazz family on the passing of Malika Shabazz. We all honor the Shabazz family and all that they've done for us. So, I wanted to of course, express my condolences to the family.
Thank you both. I mean, what a loss. And we have experienced so much loss in 2020 and beyond. And I just want to thank you both for your insight and those powerful words that you've left us with. I think the one fact that remains is when we talk about mental health, it is an important issue. We are really in a public health crisis at this moment. And so the reason why this topic resonates and should be discussed as part of Justice Now is because we have to continue to advocate for resources, to continue to lift up and have dialogue about the disparities in our communities. The more we talk about it, the more others are informed and hopefully really driven to seek the help that we need. So thank you both for joining us this evening. And thank you to all of our viewers that tuned in and shared information and insight. We are all in this together. And just remember that the time for justice is always now, and the time for taking care of ourselves and investing in our mental health is always now as well. Thank you both, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.